Good morning, everyone. My name is James Malonis, and I am the chair of OREA's Young Professional Network Committee, and I'm also a director for the Ontario Real Estate Association. We have a full house today of OREA staff and our two chairs of two of our biggest committees. So I'm going to just go through and introduce our guest speakers. First off, we have Matthew Thornton, who is the Vice President of Public Affairs and Communications. Jason Lagerquist, who is the Head of Advocacy and Stakeholder Relations. Stacey Evoy, who is our OREA President-elect and is also the chair of the Ontario Realtor Party Committee, and Brian Santos, who is the chair of the Government Relations Committee. Good morning, everyone.
Morning, James.
All right, thank you guys so much for joining us. I know we've had a fairly busy year behind us with a federal election, and we're going into a provincial election. And I'm sure our members are wondering what that means for real estate, for OREA, and the whole thing. So before I get into it, I know, Stacey, you are losing your voice. I'm not going to ask you too many questions, but the first one I have for you, since you are chair of ORP, what is the Ontario Realtor Party?
Good morning, James. Thank you. And thank you, James. While we're on this call, I want to thank you for all the awesome work that you've done with YPN. I was the chair before you, and you definitely outshone in this role. So thanks for all you do, and thanks for having us this morning. So ORP, the Ontario Realtor Party, it was created more to be in line with what was happening with our American counterparts to the south. That was at a time when fundraising was possible by associations and independent companies, which were no longer allowed to do in Canada. So over the past few years, we've really had to redefine ourselves in terms of our role. And through that, it's been more government lobbying and advocacy on issues that are affecting Ontario homeowners. And also, really paying attention to MPPs who have realtor issues at heart. So, meeting with MPPs, we've been really having a lot of meetings in the last week to push our Bring Affordability Home platform that we've just started rolling out in the last month. So it's really those kinds of things. Bringing in the personal real estate corps was huge, and something that realtors had been lobbying for approximately the last 15 years.
Awesome, thanks, Stacey. So I know we have quite a few questions to get through, and this next one I'm going to lob either to Jason or Matthew. But where do the federal parties stand on real estate issues?
Yeah, thanks, James. And again, thank you for the opportunity to speak to the group this morning. The first thing I wanted to say with respect to the federal parties is we just came through a hotly contested federal election campaign. As someone who's been following federal politics since I was a kid, really, I can say that I've never seen an election campaign where housing was such a central focus. All of the parties really paid particular attention to housing. It was a hot button issue. Each of the parties put forward what I would consider pretty robust platform commitments with respect to housing. And I think that just speaks to how important the issue is to voters right across, certainly Ontario and across the country as well. So the NDP, the federal NDP led by Jagmeet Singh, put forward a platform document called Making Sure Everyone Can Afford a Place to Call Home. There were different policy planks included, including building more affordable rental units and creating 500,000 rental units across the country, reintroducing a 30-year amortization for CMHC insured mortgages, doubling the home buyer's tax credit to $1,500, and implementing a foreign buyer's tax on sales homes to individuals who aren't Canadian citizens. The Conservative Party of Canada put forward a platform document called Canada's Recovery Plan, which featured policies such as building 1 million homes over the next 3 years, releasing at least 15% of federal real estate portfolio for housing, so surplus federal government lands to be repurposed for housing, and establishing a federal beneficial ownership registry for residential properties. The Liberal Party, who of course went on to win the campaign, led by Prime Minister Trudeau, committed to investing $1 billion in loans and grants to develop rent-to-own projects. They have committed to introducing a tax-free first home savings account, doubling the first-time home buyers tax credit, and a very controversial platform commitment to criminalize the practice of blind bidding across the country. So something that Matthew and I and OREA, that particular policy, we objected to pretty fundamentally, and we just think it's completely a wrong way to go about criminalizing someone for how they choose to sell their home. That's kind of an overview, James, of the three main parties and what they put forward throughout the federal campaign.
Awesome, thanks, Jason. I kind of wish I had that brief overview when I was dealing with my clients about the issues, because that was very high level and a very short little stint. But I do want to kind of, before I get to my next question, I want to segue over to Matt for a second, because as you know, we sit at the board table, we've talked about this, and then it was very controversial during the election when the Liberals brought up the process of trying to eliminate blind bidding. So can you talk on that, Matt, and OREA's stance on that?
Yeah, thanks, James. It was, one of those issues that I think surprised a lot of people that it emerged in the federal election. And I think right off the top, we thought that, from our perspective, the policy was really ill thought out and articulated. And I think, what the federal Liberal Party was trying to do was capitalize on just a ton of frustration that's out there right now in the market amongst young buyers who are feeling disenfranchised or feeling left out, who just can't afford the Canadian dream of home ownership, and pointing fingers at bidding processes or other issues in the market is sort of an easy way to score some political points. So right off the top, it was obvious that this was not really about a policy solution that was going to make a real difference when it comes to affordability. It was really intended to get votes. And in some of the conversations we've had with people in the federal Liberal Party after the fact, that's sort of become evident. So our response is really sort of geared towards a couple of key principles. First and foremost, as an association, we believe strongly that people have the right, or should have the right, to sell their home or sell their property how they want. It's sort of a fundamental kind of a property rights issue. So if you want to use a traditional offer process, if you want to use a more transparent process or an auction, that's up to you. That should be up to the individual seller to make that decision. So first and foremost, that's one of the reasons we took issue with it. The second part, I think, more critically, is around this notion of criminalizing people who decide to use a blind bidding process to sell their home. To us, that's just sort of totally contradictory to all of the principles that underpin kind of a free market system in Canada, the system that we've used to sell real estate and homes in Canada for probably close to 100 years. In the Western world, it almost doesn't exist anywhere. It's quite exceptional. So, the response from our association was strong in the sense that we pushed back publicly against that proposal, and we're hopeful that over the next several months, as the federal party or the Liberal Party in Ottawa starts to put together their sort of governing agenda, that issue will filter down to where it should be, which is with the provinces. Real estate, as you know, James, is regulated at the provincial level, and really, if there's improvements that need to be made around the bidding process, that's where it should be made. So we're working closely with our colleagues in the Ontario government to bring forward changes through the TRESA work that we're doing. But criminalizing the offer process in Ontario or really anywhere is just crazy, quite frankly.
Yeah, there's so much there. We can go so deep on that, but I do want to keep us on track here. A great segue here is, why are the federal party's stances important to OREA? Like, we're a provincial association, so why are the federal parties important to us at the provincial level?
Yeah, that's a great question, James. And I think housing's a policy area where federal policies are taught, provincial policies, and also municipalities as well play a big role in how housing's developed. So yeah, you're quite right. While we are a provincial association and we do most of our work at the provincial level, the stuff that's happening at the federal level and at the municipal level too are also important to our members and to homeowners across Ontario. So it's important for us to kind of have a three-pronged approach to these types of things, because housing policy is something that crosses three different jurisdictions in terms of policy.
Yeah, if I can build on that, James, one of my first bosses in the advocacy field at OREA used to say, if real estate is your profession, then politics should be your business. And that really speaks to how much public policy impacts the business of real estate, whether it's, at a transactional level and sort of the day-to-day work you're doing with your clients, whether it's through the policy that impacts, what types of homes are built where, or it's the taxation policy, which impacts, how you're running your business, or how, quite frankly, your clients are able to afford properties out there in the market. There's just so much policy, public policy, that impacts the business of real estate. So realtors really do have a vested interest in what's happening in Ottawa, what's happening at Queen's Park, but also what's happening at their local city governments as well. And so, our job as a provincial association is really, to have your back, to make sure that when there's issues on the table in Ontario specifically, because real estate is regulated provincially, that we're there, we're at the table, and we're advocating for your interests. And so that happens every single day. We have a team of professionals, Jason, myself, and several others that are up and meeting with officials and lobbying for issues like personal real estate corporations, an example, that matter to our members and are going to help you folks do business better. Really, that's fundamental to what we do each and every day.
Thank you guys for that clarity. I do want to apologize. We do have a little guest with us who joined. So the joys of working from home, right? Okay, so turning to the provincial election ahead, what have the parties been saying on real estate in Ontario?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's really hard to believe that we're less than a year away from the next provincial election. I think the government, the Progressive Conservative government of Ontario, has a really strong record to run on in the next election. They passed the Trust in Real Estate Services Act a couple of years ago, which is something that we have been advocating for a number of years, and some really strong policies in that piece of legislation, including finally allowing realtors to form personal real estate corporations. It's a really groundbreaking piece of legislation that the PCs have to hold up to voters. There's also the More Homes, More Choice Act that was passed in 2019. Again, a really strong pro-housing, pro-development piece of legislation that is really making an impact in terms of getting more shovels in the ground and more homes built for Ontario families. So the government does have a really strong track record in the real estate and housing space that they can run on next year. The New Democrats, the official opposition in Ontario, historically have tended to focus more on subsidized housing policies, very strict commitment to rent control. We've seen some policy papers put forward by the NDP. They're kind of like a mixed bag, some good, some maybe not so good policies with respect to housing and real estate. And the Ontario Liberal Party, who are currently the third party in the legislature, we haven't heard much from them with respect to housing and real estate to this point anyway. And I think that's largely because we know that the Ontario Liberals were decimated in the last election. Their leader resigned. They went through a renewal process where they elected a new leader. So they're just kind of getting back on their feet in terms of policy. So I do expect we'll hear more from the Liberals over the coming months with respect to where they stand exactly on housing and real estate. But we really haven't heard much from the third party on it to date.
Awesome. Thanks, Jason. Stacey, again, I don't want to strain your throat, but anything that you want to add with the ORP committee with the provincial election coming up?
Just that it will be a busy year. We are excited. The federal election was a little glimpse into what's to come, and we hope housing is as important at the provincial level for all three parties as it was in the federal election. I did want to just add to what Jason is saying and say that we are starting to meet with stakeholders for all three parties to sort of talk about the important issues to OREA and to our members. And we had a great fireside chat with the incoming leader, who seems very pro-housing and understood a lot of the issues that we spoke about. So for us, it's about just constant dialogue. Where YPN can be helpful is, getting out and meeting not just their MPPs, but, local officials, knowing their councillor and their mayor, getting out and meeting them. And that way, when they have a question about housing or they're unsure about something, it's great when they can call someone who lives in their backyard or, who's in their ward or region locally, and have their ear on housing issues.
Thanks, Stacey. Jason, when I recently moved and you had given me a little link to find out who my local MP was, can you just drop it in the chat while I ask Matt my next question?
Sure, yeah.
The members, if they are interested in knowing who their local MPs are, how they can find them. Matt, my question for you is, how does OREA approach government relations?
Yeah, great question, James. There's a couple of key things that we do with respect to government relations, which really help move our issues forward. At the end of the day, we're focused on it's not just about campaigns and meetings and that kind of thing. At the end of the day, we're focused on results, getting results for realtors, getting results for homeowners and people who dream of one day owning a home. So that means winning on public policy issues. And over the last, I would say 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, we've had a ton of success. I think back to, 2015, when we lobbied quite aggressively for e-signatures to be permitted in Ontario, and that was brought forward. I think that's been a game changer for realtors and real estate in Ontario. I think, back to 2015 as well, when we lobbied to stop the spread of the municipal land transfer tax, that was another big win. But really our approach, James, is sort of grounded in what I call sort of proactive engagement. We're out meeting every single day with people inside government, talking to them about issues. Just to give you an example, the Trust and Real Estate Services Act, was passed last year, went through Parliament, completely supported by all three parties. I thought that was a real credit to the work that we've done as an association. And right now it's going through a regulation drafting process. So we're in the midst of working with officials in the Ministry of Government and Consumer Services to draft those new regulations. Regulations that are going to impact the Code of Ethics here in Ontario. They're going to impact exemptions under the Act, and hopefully we have some exciting news to share on that front soon. And also regulations that are going to impact our regulator when it comes to how they're enforcing the rules under TRESA. So we're up engaging proactively every single day, communicating what we think is in the best interest of real estate consumers, but also our members, to make that sort of positive change. So instead of, I think a lot of organizations sort of sit back and wait for government to announce something and sort of wait and respond to that. We're up there proactively, really working hard, getting the job done to make sure that our members are constantly on the minds of people making those decisions at Queen's Park. So if I were to sort of sum that up, James, I would say proactively working hard every single day to make sure that realtors are well represented, at Queen's Park.
Yeah, I can give testament to that. I think it was right before the pandemic. It was myself, you, Jason, Tim Hudak was there, Tareem Kamal was there. We were all down at Queen's Park, and we were, I think, the second bill reading for TRESA. And just having realtor bodies in the room for the opposition to see that, yeah, we're here, right? And, OREA took the stance to get in front, put the pressure on. So it's not just, we say we do, we actually do it. So I do want to thank the GR team and the ORP team for that. To expand on what we just talked about, Jason, or Matt, sorry, you talked about some past advocacy work that you guys have done. Can we talk about future goals? Right, I know we're talking a little bit about the regulator and TRESA, but can we go deeper into that?
Yeah, it's it's such a critical issue right now, and so much of our resources as a team is going towards the work that we're doing on TRESA. So a couple of key areas, James. We'll give the YPN group a preview. We have a webinar coming up in a couple of weeks where we're going to give our boards and some of our members a briefing, but we'll give YPN members kind of a sneak peek into what's coming up on TRESA, because I think it's so critical to, obviously so critical to the work that you're doing out in the field and the way that you're sort of conducting business. So a couple of fronts. First and foremost, the ministry is moving towards what they're calling a principle-based code of ethics. So the code of ethics is a regulation under TRESA, governs a lot of your day-to-day interactions with your clients and consumers, but as well as other realtors out in the market. So what they're doing is they want to kind of simplify the code and remove some of the more kind of practical, what we'll call them sort of retail type elements out of the code, and strict with more kind of a rules-based set of principles, which is good. I think that at the end of the day, that's going to make the code an easier thing for realtors to adhere to and to follow, and really to understand in terms of how you need to, or I need to comply with that out in the field. So that's the first one. I mentioned exemptions, James. There's a lot of exemptions under TRESA right now for lawyers, builders, auctioneers who don't need to register in order to really trade in real estate in the province. And so over time, that's become problematic in a couple of areas. I don't want to go too deep on this issue, but I think one of the things that we're raising with the ministry is that there's a real need to review those exemptions and make sure that at the end of the day, whoever's out engaging in trading in real estate is licensed and registered, and consumers fundamentally are protected when they're working with those folks. So that's another one we're working on really closely. And then just the last one I'll reference, James, is work we're doing right now to sort of strengthen the discipline process in Ontario. Right now, it's the tools that RICO has at its disposal to discipline folks who are kind of stepping offside the rules are limited. We really want to see that beefed up. For example, just make it a little bit easier for them to suspend licenses for people that really do egregious things out there in the field. Right now, the process is cumbersome. They can appeal it up to a higher body made up of folks who actually have no real estate experience at all. And from historical reference, those decisions tend to be quite light in terms of the folks who are breaking those rules. So those are three areas. In terms of like when those new rules are going to hit the market, we expect sometime in 2022. So the rules will likely get announced probably Q1, Q2 of 2022, and we think probably brought into force in the fall of that year. So that's a very high level sort of, and I don't want to sort of put that in stone. That's kind of a moving target right now, James. A lot of things with governments are moving targets. We have an election coming up in June as well, which could change things. But that's sort of a rough timeline what we're working with and some of the issues that we're focused on.
Thanks, Matt. And I think that's a great little segue. It's like you're reading my notes that I have here in front of me. I don't know if Julie shared them to you earlier, but it's a great way for me to start over to Jason. When we're talking about advocacy, why does it take so long to achieve, right? Like you think it's such an easy process, right? Why does it take so long?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question, James. And someone who, before joining OREA, the first part of my career, I spent a little over a decade working in the provincial government in the past administration. So I think I can speak with some degree of certainty here on the process. And it's important to remember that the government, it's a little bit different than a private business. You're dealing with the public's money. I pay taxes. James, I know you pay taxes. I'm pretty sure everybody on the call pays taxes. And that's what funds all of these different programs that the government moves forward. So when you're dealing with public money, it's really important that there's kind of a robust kind of process in place to make sure that the public money is being used appropriately. So there's all kinds of layers of process that are built into that. If you look at personal real estate corporations as one example, it would have probably started by the Ministry of Finance, looking at how implementing PRECs would impact the provincial treasury. There would have been conversations that would have happened at caucus meetings. The government and the opposition parties hold weekly meetings with all of their members, usually on Tuesday mornings. So that would have been something that would have been discussed at a caucus. It would have had to have been brought forward to cabinet and had another discussion at cabinet. And then they had to pass legislation, and legislation takes time to be drafted. And then, of course, it has to be debated through 3 readings in Parliament. And then for PRECs, there's an additional regulatory component that had to be worked through as well. So, and that's why it's really important, because there's so many different layers to government policy and legislation. That's why it's really important for us as an association to be really consistent with pushing a message and deploying different tactics to keep these issues top of mind for decision makers, because there are so many layers to it and it does take time. That's kind of what goes into the decision making process at the provincial government level.
Thanks, Jason. So it's kind of from the OREA staff and above level, from a committee and realtor level. Stacey, can you elaborate on why some advocacy takes so long? Because we see, I mean, you and I sit at the board table, we see what our staff does. Our committee members and our OREA members don't always see that. So from a committee standpoint or a realtor standpoint, can you just elaborate on what Jason was talking about?
Yeah, for sure, James. It definitely, from our perspective as working realtors, seems like everything takes forever. But as Jason said, it's just a process that it goes through. Part of what I love about being, close to OREA and seeing what they do on a daily basis is just how hard our staff is working for us in terms of building these relationships with all three parties and all levels of government, because municipal can't be left out of the equation, especially when we're talking about things that have to do with supply issues. So, I know sometimes an issue will come back and it will sort of be on the floor year after year. So the personal real estate corps would be a good example. And it was something that realtors were really passionate about. So something that we kept going back to staff and saying, this is, on realtors' hot button, we need to push this forward. And, I think this was a great example of how our staff brought something to fruition that we had been working on for years and years. I will also talk from the committee level, James, about at ORP, we have something called an issues mobilization grant. And this is good for YPN to talk to their local boards about. But this is also how we move issues. So I'll just give some examples. So this is a fund by OREA with ORP, where boards can apply for this funding, and they can do anything. So with the upcoming election, they can do, say, a panel of who's running locally for realtors and the board to meet one-on-one. This past year, we've done some great research with Nick Nanos, the national pollster. So Ottawa did great polling on some seniors research. Hamilton recently did some polling with Nick Nanos, and London did a State of the Union with Nick Nanos, where he looked at a whole variety of issues. So this funding is there. The number one thing I think you're going to see coming forward at the provincial level from municipalities over the next few years that OREA will fight and put everything else on the back burner for is MLTTs, municipal land transfer tax. We know that municipalities, because of the pandemic, are at an all-time low for money in their coffers, and they're going to be looking at ways to recoup and bring money back to their coffers. So for example, Sarnia, North Bay, Mississauga, just to name three, have all sort of talked about this and tabled it in the last year. So this is something that we need YPN to keep their ears to the ground. If a local politician lets you know that their city council or municipality is thinking about an MLTT, we need you to bring this information forward. Also, we need to be talking to our local politicians. Matt gave me a great idea when I had the chance to meet our mayor a week or two ago, and it's, what can OREA do for you? So again, talking to these local people and saying, how can OREA help you? How can we assist you with the provincial government and getting money back into your coffers that doesn't look like an MLTT? Because, we just tell them right out, we're going to fight this with every ounce of strength that we have. So don't go after an MLTT, or you'll have 85,000 realtors in the province sending you nasty hate mail.
Stacey. Okay, so I know we kind of talked on a few things here, but one I want to go deeper on, because we did kind of scale over to the beginning, but two of you have it as your virtual background right now, and it is one program that OREA is currently promoting. So bring affordability home. Matt, Jason, kick it off. Tell me more.
Well, we feel, and I think the evidence would show this out pretty clearly that we're in Ontario, we're in the midst of a housing affordability crisis. The average price of a home in Ontario is $853,000. I'm not just talking about the GTHA. That's right across the province. The average cost of a home is over $850,000. You know, quite simply, families are being priced out of the housing market. The Canadian dream of home ownership is becoming less attainable for more and more families across Ontario, and that's a real problem. So OREA's kind of gotten together and put some solutions on the table and put together a pretty robust campaign to put policies on the table for decision makers at the provincial and municipal level about how we can bring the cost of housing down and keep the Canadian dream of home ownership alive for more Ontario families. So in September, led by Stacey and the ORP committee, our local real estate boards went to Queen's Park virtually and met with almost 70 members of the Ontario legislature and talked about things like increasing the land transfer tax rebate from $4,000 to $8,000, introducing a new housing supply bill to get more homes built and on the market to help address these affordability concerns. We're also going to be looking at another part of the campaign where we'll be trying to influence municipal decision makers and promoting more pro-growth and policies at the municipal level to help get more homes built across the province. And then, as Stacey said, another component to our campaign is a really laser-focused effort on municipalities that might be thinking about moving forward with the municipal land transfer tax. We know what a regressive policy that is. We've seen it play out in the city of Toronto, and we want to be prepared and in position so when municipalities come forward and are even thinking about putting an MLTT on the table, we want to put a pretty quick end to that and have a number of different tactics that we're ready to deploy to do so. Matt, do you maybe want to build on what I just said?
Yeah, just Jace, I think you summed her up really well. You know, we've run so many campaigns over the years focused on a bunch of different issues, but I'm so proud of this Bring Affordability Home campaign because it's really the right campaign at the right time. We have, as Jason said, that affordability crisis. We really need government to be laser focused on solving this problem and bringing forward changes that are going to increase supply over the short term, but also lend a hand to those, you know, first-time buyers in particular that are really struggling in this market. So, you know, lowering their tax burden, you know, helping them with those closing costs. Those are some of the things we're talking to government on right now. And I'll just highlight one of the policies that I think is really at the core of this campaign. You know, we're working with government right now to really look at a lot of the planning rules and regulations that are in place in Ontario, in particular rules that promote or support what we call exclusionary zoning. So zoning rules in places, in particular urban places where there's sort of a high degree of single family homes, and those local planning rules are preventing sort of more gentle density from moving into those neighborhoods. So turning that, you know, that single family home on a large lot into a townhome or a duplex or a triplex, that on its own would add thousands and thousands of units or the potential for units to be built and added into the market. And you know, we're working with the province to see if we can get, you know, some degree of that done in the short term. They've already started to do some of it around transit stations. They're doing what's called upzoning around transit. So developers have a right to build up to, I think it's between 6 and 12 stories around transit stations. So there's already good model for it out there. We just need them to kind of do it on a grander scale because, you know, as Jason said, we are in the midst of a crisis. We do really need bold action, and our role at OREA is to push government to be bold and to do the things that are going to make a lasting difference out there in the market.
Awesome, thank you. And I know Stacey kind of touched on my last question briefly, but how else can OREA members help OREA?
Yeah, that's a great question, James. So just first and foremost, anytime you see a call to action, so this will come out as an email. we need you to respond to those calls to action. So for example, what that might look like is, for example, most recently, Mississauga was the board that spoke about the MLTT. So quickly, our team, led by Matt and Jason, deployed resources in terms of getting right on top of this. So what it looks like for us as a member is an email from OREA called a call to action. And that's something that you need to drop everything and look at that right away. It's literally one click of a button. And what it does is it auto generates a letter that goes to your local person. So in this case, it was your local counselor, but if it was something provincial, it would go to your local MPP. It's personalized. It says, I live in your region or your ward, and don't do this. I know that for the one for Mississauga, the local counselors received over 800 letters, and I believe it was over the course of a weekend. So first and foremost is the call to actions. Secondly, it would just be, getting out. Political people love when their constituents come to their events. So just find out what's going on in your area. Get a bit more involved. You can volunteer in the upcoming provincial election. And just sharing what you know. So communicating with OREA when you hear of something coming down, don't assume that we know about it, because there's lots of regions and municipalities in the province, but just bringing that information forward, but just generally having great dialogue, making people understand that blind bidding is not something that realtors are against. They're just against not giving choice, for example. And that the legislation that was brought forward by the Liberals at the federal, on the federal platform, it only covered buyers, and sellers are 50% of a transaction that we do. So it's just really being educated and knowledgeable about the issues of the day, and just sort of communicating whenever we can about those.
Yeah, and if I can add to that, James, we would love to see more realtors step up and run for public office. There's several right now that are actually sitting in the House at Queen's Park, but realtors, just by the virtue of being very community oriented, very plugged into a lot of local issues, extremely civically engaged. The volunteer rate among realtors is significantly higher than the average sort of Ontarian. You folks make great public officials, and I really encourage, if you have the bug and you're really interested in giving back, to think about it, whether that's a school board trustee, city councilor, mayor, provincial, federal. There's lots and lots of roles out there. There's lots of opportunities. Realtors make great public officials, so that's just one thing I would add to Stacey's great list.
So what I took from that, Matt, is I should run as the mayor of Toronto.
Absolutely, absolutely, James. I will help run your campaign.
I would love nothing more. I want to be mindful of time. I know you guys do have an 11 o'clock meeting at Queen's Park, but let's get to a couple of questions from the audience here. What is your sense on federal intent to implement capital gains tax on primary residences, not just for speculators, but everyone? The federal libs keep denying it, but they floated the idea, then spend $250,000 via CMHC on studying it.
I'll answer this.
Stacey, go for it, love.
So Tim Hudak, along with the staff at OREA, have been tooting this horn for at least the past year, if not longer, where there were so much rumblings in Ottawa around the capital gains tax that we just couldn't ignore it. So definitely we've put it on CREA's radar, and we're not letting them sort of get away from that. We need to be aware that, this was so widely talked about. And then you saw that what came out in their platform, it was so watered down. But I think the concern and the threat are still there, that this is something that we can't take off of our radar, and something that would affect realtors and homeowners. So it's definitely on the mind of every realtor.
Thank you, Stacey. And one last question here before we do wrap up. Back in the 1970s, the government gave grants and affordable loans to allow first-time home buyers to get into the market. How's OREA looked into that?
Yeah, the short answer is yes. And we're at the federal level right now. There's a couple programs I think are have started and are going to be coming forward. There were commitments by the federal Liberal Party to sort of be more active in this space of kind of giving, you know, especially first-time buyers some support or grants or funding to kind of bridge the gap between what they need for a down payment. So that's happening at the federal level. At the provincial level, we're really focused on the land transfer tax and the rebate that first-time buyers get when they buy their first home. So right now in Ontario, it's at $4,000, and just by virtue of the steady increase in prices over the last 10 years, the buying power of that rebate has really eroded over time. So we'd love to see the province double that rebate to $8,000. That'll give those first-time buyers a much bigger break on their closing costs, as you folks know. So that's our focus. I think there's lots of really creative ways that we can work with the province to get more money in the hands of first-time buyers in particular. One of the challenges, though, is the province is running huge deficits. As you folks know, there's billions and billions and billions of dollars going out the door for COVID-related programs and other things. And so they're really struggling provincially to keep kind of a lid on those expenses and move back towards a balanced budget in the future. So all of our requests for the new programs have to be sort of weighed off against the need to kind of balance the budget in the long term. So we're certainly working towards those types of programs, and hopefully we'll have some good news to share either in the provincial budget in the spring of next year, or more likely in the platforms that all the parties bring forward in June.
Awesome. Matt, Jason, and Stacey, I do want to thank you guys all for joining us this morning. I know you guys have very busy schedules advocating on our behalf. So I do want to thank you. And to everyone watching, if you see Stacey on the streets, congratulate her, as she is ending her term as president-elect and will soon be OREA's president for our 100th year. So I look forward to our joint Reality Plus ORP conference. As the last, I'll be leaving my term as YPN chair, but Stacey and I will be collaborating on a 100-year anniversary party that will definitely be one for the books. So guys, thank you so much. Everyone in the audience, thank you for joining us. Check out for your emails from OREA regarding the provincial election coming up, and anything else you guys need, you know where to find us.
Thank you,
Thank you,
James. Thanks,
James.
everyone.
Thanks, everyone.